How 4 Indigenous women changed Canada's conversation on justice and racism. The city of Winnipeg was gripped by horror and heartbreak as the trial of Jeremy Skibicki unfolded, revealing the depths of violence he inflicted upon 4 Indigenous women in 2022. These women, Morgan Harris, Marcedes Myran, Rebecca Contois, and another yet unidentified woman referred to as Buffalo Woman, became tragic symbols of a national crisis. Skibicki targeted vulnerable women from marginalized backgrounds, luring them before carrying out brutal murders motivated by racism and misogyny. The trial exposed disturbing evidence of his far-right, white supremacist ideology, which he used to justify his crimes. Prosecutors described how he preyed on women living in poverty, many of them unhoused or struggling with addiction, factors that made them especially vulnerable to being overlooked or forgotten. When Chief Justice Glenn Joyal read out the verdict in July 2024, the courtroom erupted into cheers. People pumped their fists in the air, overwhelmed by emotion as Skibicki was convicted on all 4 counts of first-degree murder. Skibicki, sitting emotionless, stared ahead as the judgment was delivered, showing no signs of remorse. For the families who had waited years for this moment, it was a powerful release of pain, anger, and grief. The judge acknowledged the weight of the moment, stating that it would be artificial and disingenuous to ignore how the case had come to represent the systemic tragedies that continue to afflict Indigenous women and girls across Canada. It wasn't just a trial about 4 murders. It was a national reckoning with a history of colonial violence, systemic neglect, and racism that continues to this day. Despite the conviction, the grief remained raw. 2 of the victims, Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran, were believed to have been left in the Prairie Green landfill north of Winnipeg. Their families never gave up hope that their loved ones could be recovered and laid to rest with dignity. But at first, their pleas were met with resistance. Officials cited the immense costs, the environmental hazards, and the uncertainty of success as reasons not to proceed. A federal feasibility study concluded that the search could take up to 3 years and cost nearly $184 million Canadian dollars. Yet for the families, these numbers were secondary to the human need for closure, for truth, and for justice. The refusal to search was seen as a continuation of the systemic neglect that had put these women in harm's way in the first place. What followed was months of relentless advocacy. The families of the victims, supported by Indigenous leaders, activists, and allies from across the country, rallied at the steps of government buildings, marched through city streets, and demanded to be heard. The pressure became impossible to ignore. In the fall of 2024, Manitoba elected a new premier, Wab Kinew, the first First Nations premier in the province's history. He made a promise: the landfill would be searched. His government pledged $20 million Canadian dollars to fund the effort, and the federal government matched it. For the first time, hope returned to the families. The search officially began in December 2024. Through harsh winter weather and difficult terrain, search crews combed the Prairie Green landfill with meticulous care. In late February, human remains were recovered. The breakthrough brought an emotional wave across the country. Soon after, it was confirmed that they belonged to Morgan Harris. In March 2025, the remains of Marcedes Myran were also officially identified by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. For the families, it was a moment of indescribable emotion. Cambria Harris, Morgan's daughter, wrote in a Facebook post that the discovery of her mother's remains was a very bittersweet moment. She asked people to keep the families in their hearts, not just for that day, but every day moving forward, as they continued to trust the process and carry the weight of their loss. The Manitoba Progressive Conservatives, who had once refused the search, issued a formal apology in the legislature. Our government erred. It's as simple as that, said interim PC leader Wayne Owasco. The words, though late, were meaningful. They marked an important step in acknowledging that real harm had been done not just to the families, but to all Indigenous communities watching the case unfold. Premier Kinnew spoke plainly when he said, "Many Canadians always understood that this was the right thing to do to search the landfill. But now we can also say with confidence that this was also the realistic and reasonable thing to do." The case of Jeremy Skibicki is more than a story about a serial killer. It is a painful reminder of the ongoing crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people in Canada. The National Inquiry into this crisis released its final report in 2019, calling it a genocide and urging immediate action. Yet, years later, families still face resistance, bureaucracy, and indifference when they seek answers. What happened in Winnipeg is a call to never let these women be forgotten, to honor their lives by changing the systems that failed them. Jeremy Skibicki's crimes were heinous, calculated, and steeped in hatred. His conviction brought a measure of justice, but it cannot undo the suffering he caused. The 4 women he murdered, Morgan, Marcedes, Rebecca, and Buffalo Woman, were not just statistics. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, friends. They laughed, they dreamed, they lived. Their lives mattered. And now, through the strength and love of their families and the outpouring of support from communities nationwide, their voices continue to echo. Canada must listen. Crime never sleeps, and neither do we. Subscribe for more shocking cases.